Hello and welcome to Cybersecurity Unmasked, a podcast focused on helping organizations and individuals learn more about cybersecurity and how to make their organizations more secure and how they can really just fight the battle against the criminals that are out there. My name's Keith Hales. I'm the CEO here at InfoSystems. And joining us on our podcast today is Chris Bevil. Chris is our CISO here at InfoSystems. Chris, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Keith. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello to all the listeners, and looking forward to having a conversation about cybersecurity. You can't go wrong there.
Absolutely. Well, it's a hot topic right now. So some of our previous podcasts we just recorded more recently in the last few weeks were around compliance and around cybersecurity. And what I want to understand is, like, how do those two things work together? How do they fight each other? Like, help me understand cybersecurity compliance. Do those things, are they opposed to each other? Do they work together? How's that work?
You know, Keith, that's really a really good question. And really one of the unique things about it is people get them confused all the time. They confuse cybersecurity and compliance and think they're one versus the other, and they simultaneously try to use them. But in reality, what we need to do is think about them totally separate. Because when we think about cybersecurity, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to think about protecting our systems, our networks, really our data from digital attacks, and ultimately preventing any kind of unauthorized access or disruption. And that's really the overview from a cybersecurity perspective. The flip side of that then is compliance is really more around regulatory requirements and different frameworks. So for example, if you're a healthcare organization and you're dealing with HIPAA, you have the HIPAA requirements, and so you have to work through like this HIPAA security rule. Or if, you know, here in the U.S. now we're hearing a lot about GDPR, which is a ruling and a privacy kind of component around what's happening in the European Union, which has now made its way over here. And because of these regulations also have security components, people try to combine the two and think it's cybersecurity and compliance, when in reality, you really got to almost separate the two.
Okay, so that's a fairly simple answer, but it seems like there's a lot of confusion in the industry. Can you give us a little background on why there's confusion and why these things get lumped together so much?
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of it is because people are focused on compliance. That's the minimum standard. That's the thing that they're trying to do. Most people are trying to hit a checkbox. They're trying to say, okay, if we're compliant with our HIPAA requirements, we're going to be secure. Or if we hit our GDPR requirements, or if we're NIST CSF, we're going to be secure. Well, those are great when you're trying to go after different compliance and regulations, but that doesn't often equate to cybersecurity. And vice versa, if we're utilizing cybersecurity tools and different things, that may not help us meet those compliance requirements, and therefore there's just a lot of confusion that people have.
Okay. So they are separate checkboxes and separate, I'll say, end goals, right? So the end goal of cybersecurity is actually to be secure, and the end goal of compliance is to meet whatever regulatory or, third-party organization is helping you. Now, does that mean that those two things can't work together ever? I mean, do they ever come together where you can do something that helps meet both cybersecurity and compliance requirements?
Yeah, and they do come together all the time. You know, when you think about them from a standpoint of like you said, from the frameworks and the compliance piece, really what people are trying to do there is they're trying to have their cybersecurity wrapped around that compliance, because if something was to happen, they will be fined potentially by that regulatory body. Whereas,
so it's almost like a risk mitigation.
Yeah, you're really trying to protect yourself. So really understanding your obligations of what you're supposed to do to be compliant, but what you need to do to be cyber secure, and bring those two together. I think one of the best ways to think about this is a car analogy that I've used a couple of times. Is when you think about a car, compliance is basically like having your seatbelt in the car. You know, we get in the car, we put the seatbelt on, and we're being compliant because, one, we're told we have to, or we're going to get a ticket.
So we're following the law.
Well, we're gonna follow what the law tells us to do. But then when you want to think about cybersecurity in that analogy, think about the fact that you've got brakes, you've got airbags, you have all these different components that will help you have safety measures to ultimately protect you. Because think about it, the seatbelt, that's first and foremost, that's going to protect you, but it's also going to help you not break the law. The airbags, the brakes, those type of things, they're going to protect you because you got to have them to really protect the overall environment as a whole. And that's really the way we should look at cybersecurity and compliance, is the bare minimum and then the things that we need to do to protect us.
Okay, so how would an organization, we talked about this in the last podcast with Robert, but how would an organization know which requirements, which laws they need to follow? So how do they know what compliance standards they should be following?
Man, that's a loaded question. The first thing that I would do is I would tell them, if they have a legal department, work with their legal team. Compliance is really around privacy and security. It's really more around legalities. So they should talk to their legal team. If they don't have a legal team, they can reach out to consulting organizations that are used to dealing with frameworks and compliance. We're lucky here at InfoSystems and InfoSystems Cyber. We have that experience and that background. We can help them identify what they need to do and what they don't need to do. They can also, depending on the industry they're in, they can go to the particular website. So for healthcare, they could go to the Office for Civil Rights website, search for HIPAA, and then there's a whole list of things that they can and can't do. But really, for compliance, you need to really talk to legal first, and then determine where you need to go. And then you can talk to consultants. And if you don't have a legal department, and they're going to know, they're going to be able to help you figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah, because I imagine one's industry or businesses, that what industry they fall in, there's going to be some standard things. Banking is going to have standards that the industry is going to have to abide by. Retail has standards that industry is going to have to abide by. Healthcare, you mentioned, that's our standards, right? So the industry is going to have a lot to do with the compliance, I'm assuming.
It is, and depending on the vertical. So if you're healthcare, which we keep mentioning healthcare, that's because one that resonates with everybody, and that's that's the HIPAA rule, and so everybody's going to start thinking about it. But then if you take credit cards, there's the payment card industry, the PCI DSS. So there's requirements there that people need to take care of. If you're in the finance world, there could be, the FTC has their new rules that have just come out. There's the SEC.
A lot of new folks fall under those new rules that they don't even know about it, right?
No, there's a lot of different things. And so it really is, whatever your vertical is, you just kind of have to get an idea. And one of the ones that's really hard right now, there's actually two. It's GDPR, which I talked about, and I don't ever try to explain what that stands for. You can look it up, GDPR, and you're good. The other one is the CCPA, which is the California Protection Act, Privacy Protection Act. And both of those are relatively newer, but they apply across the country, really, and even across the pond, if you will, over to the UK. Because an organization like with GDPR, if they were to have anybody, even just one person from the European Union, if they have their information that could be determined and identified, then they're in violation of GDPR if they don't have those in place. So there's a lot of nuances. Again, you need to talk to a consulting company or a legal group or a law firm or something to really help you identify what you need to do and accomplish.
Okay. So one thing that InfoSystems does is to help an organization determine maybe how to become cyber secure and or how to become compliant with their industries is we offer a service called a cyber resilience analysis. So I know we're going to talk about that next time, but before we go down that path, we use the term cyber resilience. So how would an organization know? So let's say that they're not maybe the decision maker, maybe they're not the person in charge of compliance, or they're not the CEO, the CFO. How would they be able to maybe read the tea leaves in the organization to say, hey, my company's taking steps in this direction, or my company's kind of ignoring this? So what type of things may they see being maybe mandated down through IT, or maybe policies and procedures that get pushed out? What are some tea leaves that they can even say, hey, my company seems to be on board with this stuff, or my company's kind of ignoring it?
Yeah, that's another good question. And hopefully you're going to see things like you're going to see the human element. So you may see your company really doing phishing exercises or pushing out a lot of training and really trying to help you as an individual learn what you're doing from a cybersecurity perspective. Another component could be that they are hearing or seeing different policies being shared with them. They may hear about new tools that are being utilized. It really is a matter of what we find, in the small to mid enterprise components in particular, is that the person that might be the director of IT may also have the cybersecurity hat as well. And maybe he or she doesn't know what they need to do. And the reason for that is really because what happened was somebody had a question about a firewall, or they needed their computer fixed, and this person went up and said, that's an issue with our antivirus or our firewall. And the next thing you know, the CEO or the CFO said, hey, some cybersecurity.
Yeah, you're the IT guy.
You're the new IT cybersecurity guy. So those are kind of the things that they can look for. But ultimately, it's really, again, just watching and listening and trying to learn and seeing what your organization is doing as a whole.
So if they're seeing training, if they're seeing new policies and procedures, if they're seeing things around compliance or privacy or customer data, those are tea leaves they can read and say, hey, they might be on that path. But if they're not seeing any of that stuff, that doesn't seem like, from our perspective, they're really taking in this compliance stuff seriously yet.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about cyber resilience in another podcast episode, but since we've touched on it, the thing I think we see when we talk about our cyber resilience analysis and we talk to people is so many times they're like, we just don't know where we are. We don't know where we're going. We don't know how to get there. We know we're supposed to do something. We've read those tea leaves. We know we're supposed to do it, but we don't know how to get there. What should we do? Or better yet, hey, we're doing a whole lot, but we don't even know if it's the right stuff.
Yeah.
Those are the
We're
things.
spending a lot of money. A lot of employees may be mad because we're pushing all these policies, and we don't even know if it's the right ones, right? That's not a fun place to be for management, right?
Those are the things that folks are looking for and trying to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I think with that, that's a great place for us to wrap up this episode of the podcast and to set us up for the next time. So we really hope that this conversation helped identify maybe some of the differences between the cybersecurity world and the compliance world, how they're alike, how they're similar, but also how they're different. And so on our next podcast, we're going to be talking about InfoSystems service around a cyber resilience analysis, which is going to help an organization identify where they are on this journey and what the next step should be. So we hope you really enjoyed the podcast today and hope you can join us again next time. Thanks a lot.